Yeah. Look. It's not enough trying to plan and build. That's why we living in this hamster wheel. Broke mindset while we struggling and we damaged still. It's time for change while everybody crying the same. Time to rise to power instead of trying to rise to fame. Gotta organize, that's how we gon' fortify. Think somebody else about to save us, you done lost your mind. The system in place to castrate blacks. Time to change the narrative now, and that's straight facts.
Hi, my name is Cortland Mallory, and this is the Straight Facts Podcast. Thank you for tapping in, and today, with our first episode, we're going to talk about racism. Now, this first 10 episodes is all about money. How can we make money? Well, racism isn't too profitable, but it is a big thing that stands in the way of folks' careers. This is coming from the perspective of a young black man hoping to make some money, so, if bias doesn't affect you, then I guess this video isn't for you. So as for racism, what is it and what does it mean? Well, racism is the inability or refusal to recognize the rights, needs, dignity, or value of persons of a particular race or from a geographic region. Now, this idea has been around since humans have been around. People don't really like difference. If you look different, if you act different, difference just is uncomfortable for us, especially as we get older. However, this has its roots more specifically around when the United States began, because if you think about what life might be like without the internet, well, there's no insight into what other people's perspectives are like, right? The benefit of living in today is that you get a little piece of news from all around the world at any point in time. You can really feel like you do live with somebody else all the way across the world, living the same experience as them because we have the internet. Now, if you take yourself back to a time like 1650, where there was really more of a nationalist imperialism going on, people were super interested in their own country, but also really interested in taking over other people's countries. This was around the time where those racist sentiments really began to boil, because everybody was in their own silo. Everybody had a pocket. They were all alone. Everybody was an isolationist, and they only really had allies with people who were really close. So what does this mean? Everybody, every single race has this thought about the other. It's always about the other. Racism has this ability to perpetuate this idea within your mind that this person who doesn't look like me or who doesn't sound like me is the other, that they're over there, that they are removed from us. This is a loss in the sense of community that we have built over time. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the ideas that racism supports and when it started and how it's been going and what things look like today, as well as targeting some of the biases that you may have. So in the United States, after and during the prospect of slavery, this idea began to form that between all of the wars, the civil wars, the French and Indian War, as well as the politics of the situation, that, well, the founding fathers and some who preceded them just simply believed, hey, I want to stay on top because we're currently on top. Thinking about the mentality of when this country first was founded, those who got here and were leaders and had those sorts of qualities had more power than anybody in the United States, more power than anybody in the country, if you think about it that way. So they wanted to retain it. And the way to retain that was pretty simple. They looked like white men, and so they thought, well, let's make sure other white men can be in this level of power. And so in order to do that, the idea was, let's keep white men elevated. Let's keep them educated. Let's keep them wealthy. And let's perpetuate this idea that we are better while simultaneously building a market infrastructure that sustains that idea. So it was working for a good while. If you look all throughout the 1800s, and if you look into the beginning section of the 1900s, you can really see that white Americans they've just exploded in terms of wealth. We started the international and global economy with the work that was done during this time period, but no reparations were paid to the people whose backs it was built on. Our people, Black American people. So now today we've got this interesting dynamic where the wealth is, well, creating a gap between us. where the folks who did the work weren't paid for the work, and the folks who didn't were, and now there's just a loss of compassion. I mean, it's been 100 years, it's been 200 years. The question is, how does this possibly affect us? I mean, it's been so long. Well, it does affect us. It does affect us a lot. History actually dictates where you end up in your current situation in your life. I mean, you're probably watching this video 50 years after it's been taken, and the fact of the matter is 50 years later, my money will still matter. The money I have today will still matter. So to think that having millions of dollars or billions of dollars 100 years ago, when the true value of that was 10 times, 20 times, 50 times what it is today, you've got to know that the extent of that is billion-dollar companies. The extent of that is government-regulated entities that are owned by families who control them, right? The result of that is power. It is power and it is influence. So there is a gap. It has been here for a while. And what does it mean? I mean, does it matter? I mean, let's have that conversation. Is it wrong to have a wealth gap? So some folks are in favor of reparations, especially when you look at the socioeconomic landscape, showing that Black people have a harder time getting into those positions of wealth despite having been in the core foundational families that established the wealth of the 1% that live today. So now that we know this, what does that mean? And is racism gone? I mean, everybody thinks racism's gone. It's 2021. Newsflash, it hasn't been that long. My grandfather was born in 1943. He was a sharecropper himself, having been born to a family with 15 plus brothers and sisters. It was the best and most actionable way for them to keep the household afloat at the time. And this was my grandfather. This was not very long ago. He only just recently passed this year. We've had conversations about the subject. These things are very real. The sentiments are very real, and the ideas of racism are passed down from generation to generation. You might be teaching it to your kids now implicitly without even actively realizing it, because you don't have a plan of how to do the opposite, of how to integrate other cultures into your life. I don't have to mention George Floyd, Trayvon Martin, Sandra Bland. There are so many names. I don't have to mention them all to mention to you that bias does exist. Implicit biases do exist. Let me tell you a little known secret. As a human, a lot of your experiences, a lot of your knowledge comes from what you have seen. In fact, the life that you have lived builds out your framework for what you believe life is. If you haven't seen it, you don't believe it. If you haven't touched it, you don't believe it exists. So when we talk more about the modern day effects of racism, I mean, the civil rights movement and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. were extremely effective. Racism is illegal in the workplace. It's illegal to do it in the professional realm, at least on paper. Because, I mean, how illegal is it to discriminate against somebody? That's always been something that you have the capability of doing. If you have biases against people, you're always going to treat them differently, feel differently about them, and that's all before they get a chance to show you who they really are. The idea about racism is that because you are a certain color or from a certain place, you do certain things. Now, while being from a certain place may translate into you doing certain things, doing things because you're a certain color doesn't happen. I mean, have you ever really had the thought of, because I am this, I'm going to do this? I can tell you quite honestly, I have never thought, because I'm Black, I'm going to do this. That's not my thought process. I mean, we've all got our own thought processes of how we do things, but we're trying to become better in life. We're trying to fulfill ourselves in life, and it has to do with where we come from and who's within our village, not what color we are. So to even assert that because someone is something, that they'll do something else, is a logical fallacy. I mean, we can dig into logical fallacies all day, but the idea is that to be racist is to live in a sense of non-reality. It's to place a sense of ownership, a sense of understanding onto someone or something that you really don't understand at all. And the real question is, how do we fight it, right? So now I want to talk to you about, how do you directly confront biases you may have? One thing that we all tend to do is interact with people who look like us. Think about your circle. Now, of course, your family probably looks like you, and in my case, and what you'll realize in a lot of Americans' cases is that's not the case. A lot of people in our families don't look like us anymore. We've got a lot more of a blended culture in 2021 in the US. So to assume that someone is of a particular place and will do certain things is even more false than it's ever been. But deeper than that, how much actual contact do you have with people that you're not familiar with? It is very easy to take a narrative that somebody feeds to you and to ascribe that to the truth. How many of you have seen something on the news from a particular group that has caused a particular action and either said yourself or heard, oh, that's what they do. Oh, I'm not surprised. But then, retroactively, you would never think you don't have someone from that community in your life as a friend. You don't know what they look like when they are being positive. You don't understand what types of food they eat or what holidays matter to them, what their priorities are, their hopes, their dreams, their motivations. These are people, and everybody is different. Getting to know people in your life that are different from you will expand your own perspective, and it will help you find compassion with these groups of people that you previously thought were the other. We want to walk away from that the other effect. We want to bring the community together, and we want to have it a community vibe. Let's make this us instead of them. So this is going to conclude our first episode of Straight Facts. We have talked about racism. I hope that if you do have some bias, if you do have some racism in your heart, that this was helpful for you to combat that. I hope that if you didn't know about racism, you learned something today. And please join us on the next episode where we'll get into some more topics about how you can make money with little to no education. All right, guys, so make sure you hit that like button, comment, and subscribe. I appreciate you taking the time out to watch my video. Share it, and have a great week. Bye. A quick tip, if you're new to investing and want to keep an eye on the market, check out the Robinhood app. Use my link below to get up to $500 in free stock when you invest your first $100.